Hey guys, what's up? You already know, just hop right in. We're in Miami. It's 0 degrees out here and zero common sense. We're about to go to an art show. We just got down here. They start like right now. They better because I'm froze. So let's do it.
This world of calamity, dirty looks and grudges and jealousy, and police where you abuse them authority. Me the clowns when I know about variety. Boom, the youngest veteran I go murder them slow. Ragamuffin sent to call me from the bush bungalow. When I watch it make a clear out my voice now figure out. Emerge from the darkness with me big blood to glow. Me hammer them as slam and spectator get low. Some boy coulda big like Bam Bam Bigelow. Bust off trigger finger, trigger and then trigger toe. A 2-gun me up, me bust them in a stereo. Cause I got to keep on walking on the road to Zion. Hey, we got to keep it burning on the road to Zion. Clean and pure meditation without a doubt. Don't make them take you like who them took out. Jah will be waiting there, we a shout. Jah will be waiting there. Clean and pure meditation without a doubt. Don't make them take you like who them took out. Jah will be waiting there, we a shout. Jah will be waiting there. You got to keep on walking on the road to Zion, man.
Been waiting to do this track with you, man. Yeah. Haha. Yeah.
You know,
they know.
You got to keep on walking on the road to Zion, man.
You gotta keep walking, y'all. Yeah, you gotta keep. Sometimes I can't help but feel helpless. I'm having daymares and daytime, wide awake, try to relate. This can't be happening like I'm in a dream while I'm walking. Cause what I'm seeing is haunting. Human beings like ghosts and zombies. President Mugabe holding guns to innocent bodies in Zimbabwe. They make John Pope seem godly, sacrilegious and blasphemous. In my lifetime, I look back at paths I walked where savages fought and pastors talk. Prostitutes stomping high-heel boots and badgers scream at young black children. Stop or I will shoot. I look back and cook crack, plus cars that pass by. Jaguars, mad fly, and I'm guilty for materialism. Blacks are still up in the prison, trust that. So save me your sorries. I'm raising the army, revolutionary warfare with Damian Marley. We sparking the irons, marching the Zion. You know how Nas be, NYC, state of mind, I'm
in this world of calamity, dirty looks and grudges and jealousy, and police where you abuse them authority. Me the clowns when I know about variety. Single parents when need some charity. Youths when need some love and prosperity. Instead of broken dreams and tragedy, by any plan and any means and strategy. Say, I got to keep on walking on the road to Zion, man. Hey, we got to keep it burning on the road to Zion, man. And pure meditation without a doubt. Don't make them take you like who them to go. Jah will be waiting there, we a shout. Jah will be waiting there. Clean and pure meditation without a doubt. Don't make them take you like who them took out. Jah will be waiting there, we a shout. Jah will be waiting there. In this world of calamity, dirty looks and grudges and jealousy, and police where abuse them authority. Media clowns when I know about variety. Single parents when need some charity. Youths when need some love and prosperity. Instead of broken dreams and tragedy, by any plan and any means and strategy. Instead of broken dreams and tragedy, you shall need some love and prosperity. But not a broken dreams and tragedy. Why you the plan and enemy, none of the strategy? Hey, say, you got to keep on walking on the road to Zion, man.
I never knowed my age till after the war, and the master got out a big book, and it shows I'm 25-year-old. Shows I was 12 when I was bought, and $800 is paid for me. My mammy was owned by John Williams in Petersburg in Virginia, and I come born to her on that plantation. Then, long came a Friday and that unlucky star day, and I playing around the house, and Master Williams come up and say, "Dillis, will you allow him to walk down the street with me?" My mammy say, "All right, Jim, you be a good boy." That's the last time I ever heard her speak or ever see her.
The Library of Congress is home to most of the slave narratives, a multi-volume collection of interviews with former slaves.
What's that? You want me to tell you about slavery days?
Lots of old slaves close the door before they tell the truth about their days of slavery.
I could tell you about it all day, but even then you couldn't guess the awfulness of it.
My life was filled with heartaches and despair.
We was married on the front porch of the big house.
When they put them on the block to sell them, the ones between 18 and 30 always bring the most money.
The boys came in and threw her down on the floor and tied her down so she couldn't struggle.
Lord, child, what make you folks wait so long before you get this stuff by way back yonder?
Now, I tell you something to put in your book.
When the Civil War ended in 1865, more than 4 million slaves were set free. By the late 1930s, 100,000 ex-slaves were still alive. In the midst of the Great Depression, the Federal Writers Project hired journalists and writers to travel the country and record the memories of this last generation of African Americans born into bondage. Most former slaves were still living in the rigidly segregated South, a society deeply rooted in its Confederate past and that still treated black people as inferior. Some ex-slaves were reluctant to speak openly with their mainly white interviewers for fear of retaliation for telling the truth. But many others approaching the end of their lives were willing to tell their stories. Although these ex-slaves did not all speak in one voice, they were the last African Americans able to give a first-hand account of what it was like to be a slave in the years before the Civil War. Over 2,000 interviews were transcribed as spoken in the vernacular of the time to form this unique historical record.
Sarah Gudger. Gudger?
Yes. Miss Sarah apparently went blind a year before this interview was taken. I mean, there's nothing written to describe her, but that pretty much says it all, you know.
This, her mouth.
Yeah, the set of mouth.
When they did these, are these like, did they ask them some questions, or did they just
Each one is
talk?
a response to the question, but there was a set of subjects on a list that they would ask the ex-slaves about.
Okay.
In action.
Sarah Gudger, Slave Narratives, Volume 11, North Carolina. I sure has had a hard life. Just work, work and work. I never know nothing but work. I never knows what it was to rest. I just work all the time, from morning till late at night. Work in the field, chop wood, hoe comb. Sometimes I feels like my back surely break. Honey, you can't know what a time I had, all cold and hungry. Oh, no, I ain't telling no lies. It's the gospel truth, the gospel truth, the gospel truth.
Bells and horns, bell for this, horn for that. All we knowed was go and come by the bells and the horns. Old ram horn blow to send us all to the field. We all line up, about 75 field niggas, and go by the tool shed and get our hoes, or maybe go hitch up the mule to the plows.
On most plantations, slaves worked from sunrise till sundown 6 days a week. Some worked into the night and on Sunday too. The overwhelming majority toiled in the fields, growing crops like tobacco, rice, sugarcane, and cotton. For every field hand, 10 acres of cotton were produced. Cotton became the United States' greatest export, making plantation owners, the South, and America rich. Everyone but the slaves profited from it. For all of the ex-slaves, a lifetime of labor began at a very young age. Many started work in the master's house, often as playmates for white children.
We be playing in the barn, and Jimmy always say to me, "Come on, nigga, let's ride around the farm." I say, "I ain't no nigga." He say, "Yes, you is. My pa paid $200 for you. He bought you for to play with me."
I have about 85 years of good memory to call on. I'm 90, and so I'm not counting my first 5 years of life. My earliest recollection is the day my old boss presented me to his son, Joe, as his property. I was about 5 years old, and my new master was only 2. No, sir, I never went into books. I used to handle a big dictionary 3 times a day, but it was only to put it on a chair so my young master could sit up higher at the table. I never went to school. I learned to talk pretty good by associating with my masters in their big house.
Well, my master and all the other big white folks, they raised peafowls. We'd catch them wild things at night when they roost in the pine trees. Then my ma,
she would pull the long feathers out of the tails and make fly brushes. In them days, the dining room was big and had the windows open all the summer long. Quick as a mess of victuals come on the table, my ma fetch me in, and I get put up in a swing over the table to fan the flies and gnats off the mistress's food. Well, they had to show me just how to hold the brush, because them feathers were so long. If you didn't mind your business, the ends of them feathers would splash in the gravy, and the mistress's table be all splattered up. Wasn't long before I got used to it, and I took to going to sleep up there.
Let me see a picture one more time. Let me see a picture. Thank you. That's so wonderful. I was going to say, Jenny's house might be a little better than mine was. Jenny Proctor, Slave Narratives, Volume 16, Texas. I was here telling them good slave days, but I ain't never seen no good times then. My mother's name was Liza. I don't recollect nothing about my daddy. If I had any brothers and sisters, I didn't know it. I tended to the children when I was a little gal and tried to clean the house just like old Miss tells me to. I recollect once when I was trying to clean the house, I finds me a biscuit. And I was so hungry, I ate it. Because we never see such thing as a biscuit. But when I ate that biscuit, she comes in and say, "Where that biscuit?" I say, "Miss, I ate it because I was so hungry." Then she grabbed that broom and started beating me over the head with it and calling me low down nigger. And I guess I just clean lost my head, because I knowed better than to fight her if I knowed anything at all. But I start to fight her, and the driver, he comes in, grabs me and starts beating me with that cat o' nine tails. Beats me till I fall to the floor nearly dead. Cut my back all to pieces. Then they rub salt in the cuts for more punishment. Lord, Lord, honey, them was some awful days.
In most states, it was against the law for slaves to be educated. Slave children might play with their young masters and mistresses at home, but they could not go to school with them.
None of us was allowed to see a book or try to learn. They say we get smarter than they was if we learn anything. He slips around, gets a hold of that Webster's old blueback speller. We hides it till way in the night, and then we light a little pine torch and studies that spelling book. We learn it too.
Oh, Lord, you better not be caught with a book in your hand. If you did, you were sold. Oh, no, now, they didn't allow that.
If you just looked like you wanted to learn to read or write, oh, you got a licking.
By the age of 12, most children were working in the fields. Only a very small number stayed on to become house servants. Slaves who worked in the house were almost always better fed and clothed than the field hands, but they lived under the constant scrutiny of their masters.
Mistress Miller, she used to make my Aunt Caroline knit all day. And when she gets so tired after dark that she gets sleepy, she make her stand up and knit. Mistress would work her so hard that she'd go to sleep standing up. And every time her head nod and her knees sag, that lady come down across her head with a switch. That's the way white folks was. Some had hearts. Some had gizzards instead of hearts.
My old missus, a rich old lady, hot time in old Virginia.
More than 1/4 of the slave population lived on large plantations with 50 or more slaves, some with several hundred.
George, Eggleston, Robert, Wagoner.
Very few were highly skilled workers.
Magruder, blacksmith. Sam, carpenter. Dudley.
And there was just 2 classes to the white folks. Bucra, slave owners, and poor white folk that didn't own no slaves. There was more classes amongst the slaves. The first class was the house servants. This was the butler, the maids, and the cooks. Then come the cradlers of the wheat, the threshers, and the millers of the corn and the wheat. The lowest class was the common field hand niggas.
Back in Alabama, Mr. Adelaide Carter took me when I was past my creeping days to live in the big house with the white folks. And they was always good to me because I was one of their blood. They never hit me a lick or slapped me once. And they told me that they would never sell me from them. My brother and sister, they lived with the niggas though, 'cause they was mostly nigger. My master used to give me a little money to buy what I wanted. I always bought fine clothes. Oh, when they bought the red shoes from the town, I cried and cried. I say, I don't want to wear no rawhide shoes. So they took them back. I guess they had a weakness for my crying. I drove a carriage, with the white folk. And I was about the most dudish nigger in these parts.
Once, 2 youngins goes down the hill to the dollhouse where Master Kilpatrick's children are playing. They want to go in the dollhouse. And one of the Kilpatrick boys says, "That's for white children." They say, "We ain't no niggas, because we got the same daddy you has. And he comes to see us near every day and fetches us clothes and things from town." They is fussing, and Missy Kilpatrick is listening out of her chamber window. She heard them white niggas say, "He is our daddy, and we call him daddy when he comes to our house to see our mama."
Many owners and overseers believed that sexual access to slave women was one of their prerogatives. The rape of black women also served to humiliate their husbands and undermine the integrity of slave families.
Lord, child, that was common. Masters and overseers used to make slaves that was with their husbands get up and do as they say. Send husbands out on the farm, milking cows or cutting wood. Then he gets in bed with the slave himself. Some women would fight and tussle, others would be humble, feared of that beating. If they told their husband, he was powerless.
I was one slave that the poor white man had his match. These here old white men said, "What I can't do by fair means, I'll do by foul." One tried to throw me, but he couldn't. We tussled and knocked over chairs, and when I got a grip, I snatched his face all to pieces, and there was no more bothering Fanny from him. But oh, honey, some slaves would be so beat up when they resisted. And sometimes, if you rebel, the overseer'd kill you. Us colored women had to go through plenty, I tell you.
My mother's mistress had 3 boys. 121, 119, and 117. Old mistress had gone away one day, and mother always worked in the house. While she was alone, the boys came in and threw her down on the floor and tied her down so she couldn't struggle. And one after the other used her as long as they wanted for the whole afternoon. Mother was sick when her mistress came home, and when old mistress wanted to know what was the matter with her, she told her what the boys had done. And she whipped them. And that's the way I came to be here.
Oh, Eve, where is Adam? Oh, Eve, Adam in the garden, picking out a leaf. God called Adam, Eve and Adam. My dog called him, Adam won't answer. Oh, Adam, Adam James, Adam won't answer. Oh, Adam, why don't you answer? Who told you, Adam, that you were naked? Why God call you? Why don't you answer?
I used to have to pick cotton. Sometimes I picked 300 pounds and towed it a mile to the cotton house. Some picked 300 to 800 pound cotton and have to tote the bag the whole mile to the gin. If they didn't do their work, they get whipped till they have blisters on them. I never get whipped, 'cause I always get my 300 pounds.
Cut. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at that. I'm sorry.
That always gets me at the pride of...
Right. She's right.
Yes. They just...
Sometimes, slaves who had picked their quota added some of their pickings to those who had been slower or ill. It wasn't always enough.
White folks sure would whip you in them days. They lay you flat on the ground on your face, then they stake you, and so you couldn't get through the ground, much less get up and fly. Take every rag off of you and leave you plumb naked, and then they whip you till the blood come. They whip you straight like this, see? Straight up and down, and then they checker you. In other words, they beat you crosswise, and so your flesh would cut up in squares. You understand?
On many plantations, whippings were public spectacles. Owners used the lash to terrorize as well as to punish their slaves.
My brother January was a big fine nigga. Finest I ever seen. He was just 4 years older than me. And when Master began beating him, January never said a word. The master got madder and madder because he couldn't make January holler. "What's the matter with you, nigga?" he said. "Don't it hurt?" January, he never said nothing. And the master keep a beating till little streams of blood started flowing down January's chest, but he never holler. His lips was a-quivering and his body was a-shaking, but his mouth, it never opened. And all the while, I sat on my mammy and pappy's steps a-crying. The niggas was all gathered about and some of them couldn't stand it and they go inside their cabins. After a while, January, he couldn't stand it no longer himself. And he say in a hoarse, loud whisper. Massa, Massa, have mercy on this poor nigger.
Then they take the salt and red pepper and put it in the wounds.
The skin jerk and quiver and the man slobber and puke. We little niggas stand around see it done.
After he lie in the sun a while, they whip him again. But when they finish with him, he was dead.
When a slave died, Massa make the coffin and send a couple of niggas to bury the body and say, "Don't be long, and no singing or praying allowed. Put him in the ground. Cover him up. Hurry on back to that field."
They put the coffin on the ox cart and carried it to the graveyard. They just had a burial that day. They waited to have the funeral sermon on Sunday, or some other time when the crops had been laid out and the other slaves could be on hand.
I read the water to my knee. I'm gonna pray,
For enslaved people, funerals were extremely important. The ceremonies reinforced their sense of community and kept alive their African past.
Yes, and a nigger used to sing to nearly everything he did. It was just the way he expressed his feelings, and it made him relieved. It is a nigger's most joy and his most comfort when he needs all these things. They sing about the joys in the next world and the trouble in this.
Throw me anywhere, Lord, in that old field. Throw me anywhere, Lord, in that old field.
In the fields, niggas like to sing and make up songs. A bunch of go on one side, lift up their head and roll out. And on the other side, pick it up and go the same way and just make up some words. There was lots of just make up songs.
Jai, you ought to hear them niggas singing when they go to work in the morning. Just a singing to beat the band. A cold and frosty morning. The niggas mighty good. Take your axe upon your shoulder, nigga. Talk to the bud.
This time tomorrow night.
Sometimes they sing this sorrowful, 'cause some niggas have been beat or whipped or sold away.
Down to Tennessee. I've been down on the bending knees, talking to the man from Galilee.
During the hard times of the Depression, when the slave narratives were collected, most ex-slaves were still living in extreme poverty.
Great God Almighty, let me tell you what he said. They run on for a long time.
Yes, I was born a slave, and so was Rosa. We got out of the chattel slavery, and I was better off for getting out, but Rosa don't think so. She says all we got freed for is to starve to death. She says her white folks were good to her, but don't you expect me to love my white folks. I love them like a dog loves a hickory switch. I can say these things now. I'd say them anywhere, in the courthouse, before the judge, before God, 'cause they done all to me they can do. I'm done past everything but worrying about Rosa. 'Cause she don't get enough to eat and 'cause she feels bad all the time. But there ain't no complaining in her. Mama, how you feel in the sun?
Best to be expected this time of year.
I was born in Georgia on a farm. My mother's name was Lucinda. I heard other Negroes say she was a good woman, but she died when I was a little boy, not more than 3 or 4. She left my little brother a crawling baby, about 11 months old. I can remember crying.
It's a story that can't be forgotten because there's so much injustice. There's so much hatred. And it's something that we can't ever allow to happen again in our country and in the greater sense in the whole world. The best way that we can fight ignorance is to educate. And so kids need to know this story about human injustice, about doing what is right, about going and believing in something to the point where you take action on it.
Every day across the United States, school children recite the Pledge of Allegiance. The last sentence states, "with liberty and justice for all." That liberty and justice came at a price. In America, between 1607 and 1865, African Americans didn't have their freedom. During this time period, they fought to be free. However, their story has often been excluded from the American experience. Why? Because most of their stories come from the oral tradition. And until the Civil Rights era, their story wasn't considered important. African Americans, Native Americans, and Euro Americans worked together here in Kansas between 1854 and 1861 to make Kansas a free state. They established the western edge of the Underground Railroad in this country, which started the long journey to liberty and justice for all.
When troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. shore.